about. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for inviting me to your meeting. I've never been here before, and I'm excited to share my experience, strength, and hope with you all. And just to give you a little bit of background, like Ali said, I've been sober since December 23rd, 1972. And that doesn't make me wise, it just makes me old. Let's face it. It just, I've been in these rooms most of my adult life. I came in when I was 23, scared, brash, fearful kid who had no idea what life was about. But what I did know, that I had a problem. I had a problem with alcohol. And I just want to relate something to you before I get into the topic. When you look in the mirror, and you finally look at yourself in the mirror, and there's no way that you can make excuses or defend the behavior. And you look at it and you say, what am I doing? What am I doing? Everything I loved, I've hurt. Everything I sought to do, I hadn't done. Couldn't count on me. Really, alcohol was my slave master. I would follow it no matter what it demanded of me. But just to give you a quick idea, I'll just relate one drunk story. About 3 weeks before I was going to go to a dance with my wife, drinking had already been a problem. I was about 22 years old, and my wife said to me, "John, please don't get drunk at this dance." And I looked her straight in the eye and I promised that I wouldn't. And I went and bought a suit for this dance, and I just remember going into the tailor shop to buy a suit. And walked in there, and I said, I'm going to a dance in 3 weeks. I'd like to buy a suit, and I'd like you to show me some of the cloths and so on, the styles. And sure enough, the tailor did his job. But I never once asked him, or thought to ask him, matter of fact, how did that suit work in a fight? It never entered my mind. And I didn't ask him if the sleeves would be torn off easily. Never asked him. He said, you need a new shirt. I do. And he brought out a couple of shirts, and it never occurred to me that what it looked like in blood. Make sure that the color was complementing the blood. Never thought about it. Never entered my mind. And he showed me a tie. And I didn't figure, if I buy a clip-on tie, if somebody grabbed it, they couldn't choke me with it, and they would just pull off in their hands, and I can go and hit them. I didn't think about that. And then came the morning of the dance. My wife went off to work, and she says, "You promised not to drink today?" And I said, "I do promise." And what happened was, as soon as she left the house, I was drinking. And I promised her that I'd only have 3 drinks during the dance, and I meant it. Everything in my soul meant that to be. Went to the dance, and I had 3 drinks was my quota. I went up to the bar and I ordered a double, and because it came in 1 glass, it only counted as 1 drink. I come back, sat down, finished my drink, went back to the bar, and I had ordered 2 doubles. One I just drank at the bar, and the other one I took back, and that counted as 2. I couldn't count the one that was drank at the bar because I wasn't at my table. A few minutes later, a fellow beside me said, "Can I buy you a drink, John?" And I said, "Sure." And I didn't count that because I didn't pay for it. And at the end of the evening, you can imagine, here I am, drunk and in a fight. My suit sleeve was torn. My shirt was full of blood. And I was choked by my tie. And here's the part that I often think about. My wife said, "You promised that you'd only have 3 drinks." And I looked her straight in the eye. You know what I said? That's all I had. And I would lie to the grave. That's my story in a nutshell. One experience. But they're all very similar. Once I started drinking, I couldn't predict what I was going to do, where I was going to go, when I would show up again. You all know that kind of story. We all lived it. It's like a living hell. And so that should qualify me, friends. So tonight I've chosen this idea of, on page 86 of the big book, our thought life will be placed on a much higher plane when our thinking is cleared of wrong motives. And I chose this topic because of the constant tension of my thoughts and goals God has set out for me. You know, social architects suggest that we have anywhere from 20,000 to 75,000 thoughts a day, and many of mine stem from the wrong motives. Before I share my practices with you, I like to create the context in which I'll be speaking. Consider the following questions. Have you ever tried to control or manage your thinking? I become obsessed about this with the reason why. Why did I become an alcoholic? Why do I eat too much? Next question. Have you ever been surprised by a thought that comes into your mind? You know, last week I had a drinking dream. After 48 years of sobriety, I dreamt that I went out and drank. And the dream was so vivid and real for me, I felt the shame and the hopelessness of a relapse. Now, one would think, where'd that thought come from? Where did that motive come from? And I'll tell you, I can explain it today. I believe it was God sent to remind me of the courage it takes for someone to come back. How badly they feel about letting themselves and their families down. And it takes guts to come back and admit. Have you ever had recurring thoughts like I'm not good enough or pretty enough or smart enough? Keep showing up. Have you ever wondered why you acted on thoughts that you knew were counterproductive and inconsistent with what you're trying to be? You ever blindly followed and acted on a thought without examining the consequences? Well, I have. I'll give you an example. I mistakenly mixed up a wrong or right motive. I got confused about the motive of ambition and greed. And this is after I got sober for some time. And I didn't accurately identify the problem. I didn't realize it was greed that was motivating me that I make decisions based on that wrong motive. And I just had to have more until I rose to the level of incompetence. Now, that has severe repercussions for me. In terms of dollars, about $1 million. I lost my family. I was alone in the world, and I had nothing. All because I couldn't see the wrong motive. I couldn't see it. I was blinded by my ego. These wrong motives can be devastating. You know, on page 23 of the big book, it says, therefore, the main problem of an alcoholic centers in his mind rather than in his body. And in the doctor's opinion, we read that the body of the alcoholic is quite abnormal as his mind. What does that mean? What changes in the mind occur when one becomes dry? Anything? Or is there a lingering problem with old motives, old ideas? I continue to jump to conclusions, and I look for something wrong. And often I'm critical. See, those are the motives that start guiding my thoughts. I judge. And from that place, all kinds of thoughts occur. then after the thoughts, sometimes behaviors occur. So let me step back for a moment. Motives often drive thoughts, and those drive behaviors. What are motives? We could define a motive as a reason for an action. Causes a person to act in a certain way. And what are some wrong motives? Self-pity, dishonest, self-seeking, to name a few. But there are others. Next comes the question of power. Am I able to switch these motives out, like changing a battery in a flashlight? Throwing the old ones out, never to be seen again, and replacing the new batteries in the flashlight, or install new motives, the motives I wish to install. Well, this isn't my experience. This has been and continues to be a lifelong practice. Do I have the power to create and put into motion positive, life-giving motives? Sorry, friends. I cannot constantly sustain the effort to show long-term meaningful results. I've tried for many years, and I've come to a conclusion. I cannot control my innermost motives and therefore cannot manage my thoughts. What should I do? Should I just give up? Should I just say this is the way I am and that's how I was born? You know, this all sounds very familiar, doesn't it? You know, I couldn't control my drinking. I tried over and over again with no success. And it wasn't until I claimed powerlessness over alcohol that I was gifted with sobriety. Gifted by a higher power who has all power. That one is God. I cannot speak about wrong or right motives without speaking to you about God. It is in this context that I can win the battle of motives, ambivalent thoughts, and proper actions consistent with His will be done. First thing I need to do is have a state of created hopelessness. I must abandon myself to Him. I must give up the fight and the obsession of managing my motives. I cannot manage my life, and I must surrender to God who provides grace, courage, power to overcome any and all things. Now, referring to the big book on page 25, it talks about the great fact. And the great fact is this and nothing less, that we have deep spiritual experiences, which has revolutionized our whole attitude towards life, toward our fellows, and towards God's universe. The central fact in our lives today is the absolute certainty that our Creator has entered into our heart and lives in a way which is indeed miraculous. He has commenced to accomplish those things for us, which we can never do for ourselves. If I could continue to live my life built on effort and determination, self-will, I will lose this game. I will always be unhappy, lack peace, and will have no joy. I meditate on the great fact because it reminds me of the power of God. That it isn't just some concept or some idea. It is a real power. Power which I don't have. My success relies on giving up or surrendering. Being available. Being empty. It's a Greek word called kenosis. Kenosis is emptying oneself. Think about it. If you think you know, there's nothing there to learn. It's only when you're empty, blank, and be radically open-minded that you're able to learn. And this is what I had to do in the belief of my God. Page 53 of the big book, this is a great quote. When we became alcoholics, crushed by self-proposed crisis, which we could not postpone or evade, we had to face the proposition that God either is everything or he's nothing. There's no middle ground for me. Either he's everything or he's nothing. And if I have a challenge in my life, like wrong motives, I had to come to the realization, and this is after years of effort and knowledge, that I could not live up to what I was trying to achieve. I could not manage my motives, my thoughts, or my actions. So there's no one else to turn to other than God. But you know what? We can recover from this state of mind. It's just a short scripture verse which I'd like to share with you because it explains something that I believe so deeply in. 1 John chapter 4, verse 4. You belong to God, children, for the one who is in you is greater than the one who is in the world. This verse gives the idea that God is within me, that this power exists. And it doesn't exist out there in some faraway world. It exists in me. That is the source of my power. I'm aware that I've been given the power through the eternal God to overcome anything and everything that comes my way, if I'm able to trust and surrender completely to him. I think you can see how important it is to start from this point. Either I believe or I do not. And if I still don't believe, I will not be able to manage these motives, thoughts, or my actions. God is always available to me, always providing grace, power, love, mercy, no matter even if I turn away. God constantly floods me with these virtues as I've been created as likeness and image. Now I have the authority. God's grace will deal with my wrong motives, but using a strategy of mindfulness, acceptance, and a commitment. Why mindfulness? Step 10, that's a daily habit of self-appraisal. And I become more and more aware of my defects of character and my assets. I become awake. I begin to see things that I never saw before because they're familiar to me. And as I do my step 10, I begin to recognize these wrong motives, or before I was blind. Now I can fall asleep and live in an automatic way without examining anything. And these wrong motives and old ideals will rule me. When I operate on autopilot, old, unhelpful motives bubble up unconsciously, and my thoughts follow whether it is right or wrong. So I need to wake up. I need to check these motives and look for familiar patterns. I'm sure you've heard in the doctor's opinion, read the doctor's opinion often, and he explains that we alcoholics are restless, irritable, and discontent. From that place, you can imagine how motives are formed. We have a set of beliefs about ourselves and about our others and about God's universe that actually manufacture wrong motives. And under these motives are beliefs. Again, about beliefs about ourselves, about others, and about God's universe. And it is at that deep level of work, changing beliefs changes motives. So what happens when I fail to do this, and I fail to do it often, by the way? I must be very careful not to become obsessed or fight with the motives or thoughts. That'll even make the problem worse. I must learn to accept my shortcomings without being upset or disappointed in myself. I need to find a new relationship to failure and explore self-care. What I'm committed to is, by the grace of God, is to let go of wrong motives and be open to replacing them with positive motivators, better thoughts, and better behaviors. See, I compare motives, thoughts, like alcohol. The more I struggled with alcohol, the worse the problem got. And once I accepted the problem and that I was powerless, it fell away so a new life could begin. This strategy is the same with my wrong motives and poor thinking. Simply accept and embrace and let them go. No longer am I thinking about how bad or weak I am. My mind is cleared of wrong motives, and God provides new life-giving motivators. So let's give you an example. One great motivator is the principle of love and tolerance, our code. Imagine having a love intention foremost in my mind. What would my thoughts be like? What would be the natural outpouring of love and tolerance? I wouldn't have to make an effort to change my thoughts. The natural outpouring would be one of inclusion, kindness, generosity, being in service of others, reaching out to help. That's what happens when you love and you're tolerant of everything. Another benefit is inclusion, unity, and a deep sense of belonging. Another benefit is being purposefully and usefully whole. You know, if you consider beliefs, motives, thoughts, actions, these are like a string of pearls, all connected together, held together by a common thread. And if we could start with the beliefs, it's natural to have right motives, productive and effective thoughts, and right actions. You know, I referred to page 85 in the big book. It just comes. That's the miracle of it. We're not fighting it. Neither are we avoiding temptation. We feel as though we've been placed in the position of neutrality, safe and protected. We've not even sworn off. Instead, the problem's been removed. You know, I realize this quote was meant for alcohol, but my experience shows me that this principle we could live by can be used with motives, thoughts, and actions. My beliefs affect my power. My power affects my motives. My motives affect my thoughts. And finally, my thoughts directly affect my actions. Should I be surprised when wrong motives show up? No. But I'm prepared for them today. I stand on guard at the gate of my mind, ready to see and look for these wrong motives. And sometimes they slip through. And I'll give you an example in my life. People call me Big John, a term of endearment, I believe. But when I hear someone call me that, my feelings get hurt because of my size. It pushes on my Achilles heel. There's no direct intention to hurt me. But because of this hurt that I have, this bruise I have, one mention of it, my feelings get hurt. A couple of years ago, a greeter at the meeting said to me that I should eat more salads. And you can imagine with that thought and belief about myself where that sent me. And I looked him straight in the eye about 8 inches from his face, and I said to him, you know what? Your mouth is going to get you in a lot of trouble. I was angry, and he knew it. My visceral response, it was my blood rushing up in my head. My heart was beating fast, and my fists were clenched. I can remember thinking, one more word. That's all it's going to take. You know, after that, he came to me later in the meeting and apologized, and I too apologized to him. This is how easy it is to let up on the practice and my results. When something hurts, there's a bruise there. I need to heal the bruise. I can't ignore it. I can't pretend it's not there. Because once it's touched, my motives become wrong. So I need to deal with how I feel about being called Big John. And I have to confess to you, friends, my work continues with that today. You know, wrong motives includes judgments, conclusions about others, anger, sadness, and fear. The counterpoint is always love and tolerance of others, service, and being the best that I can be today. The goal is always to reduce my self-centeredness with the inclusion of others, with kindness and generosity. You know, my thinking becomes elevated when the wrong motives are temporarily taken away. God provides these beautiful virtues in my life. You know, one can easily see if I wanted to change behaviors or thoughts, one needs to change motives and beliefs. Now, there's another wrinkle in this solution, by the way, friends. It's called emotions. And emotions will dictate motives, just like that example I gave you with the greeter at the meeting. You know, there are 4 basic emotions: happiness, sadness, anger, and fear. 3 or 4 of these are negative, and they will remain open for the door of wrong motives. They'll exist there always. So you have to be attentive, vigilant, cautious, slow in coming to conclusions. This is where I need the understanding of my strengths and weaknesses in my step 10. I must learn about my tendencies. You know, mindfulness, acceptance, and commitment will slow wrong motives so God can intervene. I need to accept that they exist in me, and embrace the idea that they'll always be with me, and that God will take care of them. You know, I've done some extensive work with thoughts as well. Thoughts are not commands or rules that must be followed. They're only thoughts. I am not my thoughts, but I have thoughts. I am someone other than my thoughts. I need not follow my thoughts like they were issued by a slave master. And I can choose a different thought to act on. You know, there's a short exercise I'd like to give you after this meeting in your own home. It just takes about 30 seconds. It's called I Can't Walk. This is how it goes. While walking through your home, put a thought in your mind that you can't walk, and watch what happens. You'll continue to walk. See, our actions are separate from our thoughts. Next is something important, is what they call cognitive diffusion. So I say I have a thought like, you know, I am lazy. Diffusion is a separation of yourself and distancing yourself from the thought. I am lazy describes an identity. Like a dog barks, laziness is my identity crisis. I learned to say this: I have a thought that I was lazy. Or even better yet, I notice I had a thought about laziness. See, the latter is much weaker than the identity statement, and therefore much easier to let go of. See, that little vocabulary to me is a strategy to let go, to diminish the strength of something that's bothering me so that I can let it go. This is what I found. When I attempt to manage my emotions or thoughts or motives, it's like I remove myself from the game of life and I go sit on the stands. No happiness, joy, or peace. The energy and the focus is on the management of my thinking. And it doesn't make for a great life. If, however, I turn the management over to God, hook, line, and sinker, my focus is on living life in the moment, the perfect way to live. Finally, I just believe that I belong to my higher power. See, I just don't believe in a higher power. I belong to my higher power. Not like a slave and a slave master, by the way, but part of a family. That's why I call him my father. I'm part of his family. I have an inheritance with him. And I'm always seeking to do his will, even though it's confusing to me most of the time. One of my favorite authors is Thomas Merton. And in a book called The New Seeds of Contemplation, Thomas Merton, a Trappist monk, a horrific light writer, wrote this about himself. He says, "Father, I don't even know who I am. And I'm not sure that I'm doing your will. But I know the desire for me to do your will pleases you." And the reason that touches my heart is because it removes certainty. I'm not certain I'm doing God's will, but I have a deep desire to do it. I have a desire to follow that narrow path because I'm promised freedom in the gateway. Freedom from all addictions. Freedom to use my talents to the best of my ability. Be in service of other people. See, when my motives are right, all that seems like a natural thing to do. It's not an effort. It's not a struggle. I'm not expecting results. All I'm doing is fulfilling what God has given me. And I'm always reminded that this God I serve is a forgiving, benevolent, empathetic, kind, and merciful and loving God. And it isn't a bridge too far to see how these beliefs shape my motives. To solve this motive, thought, action problem, I need to expand my prayer life and meditation. I don't know, 25 years ago, I started a meditation group, a friend of mine and I, in Ancaster, Ontario. The reason why we started that group is because I wasn't meditating. I was 23 years sober, whatever it was, 24 years sober. And I wasn't meditating. I was a busy guy. I was building a business. I was having a family. I was looking after things. And God got what was left over. You could see the funnel. I didn't give God my best. I didn't give God the most. But I'd come to one of those realizations. I looked myself in the mirror and say, here's step 11, John. You're not doing it. You're not doing it. You're going around. I've read all kinds of books about meditation, and I'm not doing it. So I started a group. Sometimes we create what we need. And that's what happened with me. I needed to meditate, and I knew it. God was inviting me into a deeper relationship, and I was saying, no, thank you. I was turning away. So then, started that meeting. My practice of meditation increased. I practiced silent meditation. It could be two-way prayer. It could be walking meditation. It could be any number of things. But for me, it was the silent meditation. I sat quietly, listening, becoming sensitive to the intuitive nature that God has given me. That the experience and wisdom in my life is on the shoulders of the generations before me if I want to pay attention. And I became very interested in silence. Yeah. So I had to expand my prayer life. I had to make it to the top of the funnel. It had to become the first thing I did. And therefore, before I begin any resolution of a problem, I pray to God for guidance and direction. I pray for His power and grace. And from there, I seek intuitively a solution. I don't know how much time I got, friends. Perhaps someone can help me. I lost track.
5 minutes?
5 minutes? Okay. So this is something I want to share with you, because in our meditation groups, we actually experience something. The two groups as help start, we actually practice the step 11. We don't just talk about it or read about it or learn about it. We actually practice it. And that's been a great deal to me. Because friends, you know what happens is that we can know a lot about a subject and yet not do anything about it. Sometimes it's difficult to separate experience from knowledge. They sometimes blend together. So I don't know what their experience is in this room. I know there's 203, almost 300 people here. And I don't want to presuppose that people don't meditate or understand the experience and the presence of God. But I'd like to share with you a practice that hopefully would mean something to somebody. And first of all, I want you to be present. I want you to get present. And the only way to be present is start to experience your world as it is right now. So I want to ask you something. Just close your eyes, each of you. And if you be so willing to follow along and allow me to guide you, what we're going to see and feel is the experience of the presence of God. So by doing that, I'm just going to ask you to feel your feet on the floor. So you have to be present to feel your feet. If you're sitting in a chair, feel your back against the back of the chair or the couch. I'd like you to pay attention now to your breath. So breathing brings you into the present state. Imagine breathing in peace, joy, happiness, gratitude, and expelling all the darkness that resides in you. All the defects of character, all the wrong motives. Just expel that through your exhale. Pay attention to your breath again. All that is good, all that is powerful, all that is joyful. And as you begin to feel your breath, your chest going in and out, I want you to begin to feel the presence of the Spirit of God within you. The Spirit that's always there, that sometimes we are not aware of or we ignore. But what I want you to do in this exercise is to actually feel it. Feel it moving inside of you to all your extremities, to your feet, your hands, and your head. Feel the warmth in your heart as you begin to really get sensitive to the presence of God. And as you're getting sensitive to the presence of God, examine a motive for tomorrow. What would a right motive be for some thought and action tomorrow? Perhaps it's love and tolerance for others. Perhaps it's a simple phone call to say hello. Perhaps it's phoning someone you wouldn't normally talk to. Because the presence of God is issuing this grace to you. It needs to be poured out of you. Grace can't be held within. Can't be stopped. It has to flow out. And the more it flows out, the more grace you get in. It's a flow. It's a universe of biology. It just is a beginning, and there's an end, and there's a cycle. So examine the motive. Maybe you can be more attentive for someone tomorrow, just one person. And as you've really been clear about a motive, who would you call? What would you say? How deeply are you willing to commit and connect to that person? What message would you like to share? See, that's the presence of God working in us and directing us if we allow it to happen. It is absolutely miraculous to live in this way. So friends, as we conclude this little exercise, you can do it any time that you wish, and you can enhance the presence of God in your life by simply getting present. So friends, I don't say hopefully, I said what I said, and I believe that it's been given to me by the grace of God to say whatever I have to say. I'm not an authority. I'm a simple sojourner like you are. We're on the path, trudging along this destiny path, and we're all together. We're all holding hands. We're all connected. And thank you for my sobriety to each and every one of you, and thank you for your generous listening. I'll pass